TCG community, welcome back to another video with Chris, and today we're going to be going over the set 20 leader tier list. Just going over and seeing what we think would be technically viable right now, and what we're seeing some of these decks being placed when the new format comes out. So if you enjoy these videos, make sure you guys like and subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. As always, thank you guys for all the support as we're on our way to 2,000 subs. I know we've kind of been stuck in the 2000s for a while. All that has to just do with me, honestly. I just haven't been able to put out content as much as I want to. It is what it is. Obviously, this is a fun thing that I do, so it's not something that I'm trying to. I would like to make this something eventually. Love to be able to make content for a living, but that's in the future. And right now, we're gonna go over what leaders we have. Actually, let me fix the template here. Looks like it was there. We go, perfect. And I'll move it up a little bit. Perfect. Okay. So I created 5 tier lists, or tiers for this tier list. Starting with D, we have for fun decks or decks that are power crept on launch. Now this does happen. We do get this a lot, where a deck will just come out and it's just not viable currently, right? So it's not necessarily that the deck is bad, but when it comes to playing against other meta decks, it just falls behind. It's just lacking that that turn X curve that can actually put it over other decks. We have the C tier, which are good decks that are missing pieces. So these are decks that are just feel incomplete, whether it's they're missing a promo, they're missing a good, a good or a better leader, whether they're missing a boss monster or something else to get the engine started. These are different, the things that could potentially be why a deck is not performing well, and stopping it from being meta. Then we have B tier, which is going to be what is currently viable in the meta right now. This is obviously going to be before the ban list, which we'll probably get in the next maybe 2 weeks or so. So these are decks that I could see doing well in the meta right now. And then A tier and S tier are both very similar. Both of these lists have these tiers have very high ceilings, meaning these decks can be performed multiple forms of sequencing, multiple play lines that can make this deck successful. And there's multiple different ways of doing that. Also, A tier, the reason why there's a difference between the two, A tier has a higher ceiling. So essentially decks that have really high ceilings and really high floor entry, meaning that it's harder for you to understand how to play the deck at a high level. You're going to take longer to learn particular matchups and particular sequences, and that can actually end up forcing you to maybe play a different deck because the deck's too hard, right? Or you just can't figure out the current meta, so you put the deck down. Generally, really good decks have a very low floor and also have a very high ceiling. So these are decks like Trunks Vegeta, for instance, is considered I would consider an S tier deck. It's a very high ceiling for how the deck can perform, but also has a very low entry, meaning that a lot of people can actually get into the deck. Another S tier deck would be considered SS4 Gogeta. This is the deck that has a very high ceiling in what the deck can do, but also I would say a lower entry level than some other decks, where it's easier for people to pilot and easier for people just to do well with the deck. So here we have all of the set 20 decks. This includes the promo leader as well as the 2 starter decks. I did want to include those, which is kind of why I waited to make the video, because I wanted to see what the starter decks were going to be. So that way we can include those in the deck here. So we're going to start with yellow and just go from yellow and see what we have here. So we have the SS Vegeta. This is the new Majin yellow leader, which actually seems to be a pretty interesting leader here, I would say. The deck is a yellow Saiyan, which is obviously going to be very good. Has its own Z leader, has very powerful early boss monsters, with also the effect of being able to have like almost like a servant type of card. But then your Z leader has a very powerful win condition, being able to give your leader a big bonus, as well as being able to kill things, ignoring barrier, and just board wipe, which is really powerful. I think this deck, in the grand scheme of things, is probably in like this category here. It's probably in like the low B tier. I definitely think people could end up winning or placing with this deck. It's just going to depend on if people play Trunks Vegeta or not, right? So in the grand scheme of things, if people do pick up this deck to play, I think people will be able to do okay with the deck. The deck seems to be okay. It uses a lot of almost all of the good yellow generic cards. So it's there. It's there. We're just going to have to see it on release. But I definitely think this deck can be meta. That brings us to Majin Buu. Majin Buu is okay. The concept of the deck seems to be you play one Buu, and then you kind of go up this Majin chain. But your card has to be in rest mode, and you have to combo it on your opponent's turn to play it. Which is just weird. But it seems to be kind of an okay mechanic. I think there's too many pieces, and there's too much energy you have to actually sacrifice in order to make this engine sort of work. So we're going to put this in the for fun section. I think this deck could be cool. Has some very cool archetype pieces, but it's not. It's just not that good. I think the deck actually did get a little bit better when they showed off the Z Battle cards, since the Z Battle card can give the Buu above it barrier as well as being able to stop it from being KO'd once per turn. But I don't think it's enough. I did get a promo. The promo is actually better for another yellow leader in the set, more than the actual Majin deck. Brings us to Babidi, which is the actual promo leader. Babidi, essentially yellow AOD, right? Like, this is going to be a very interesting archetype. We're going to see AOD, I mean, 2 different forms of AOD decks now that can be played in competitive. I think the better part with the yellow leader is, depending on what you charge, I think you can use Mecha Frieza, Robotic Repose, you can use Power of a Super Saiyan, you can now use Gohan Piccolo Secret Rare. Right, there's a lot of good tools that you can have as a yellow leader, as well as being able to use all of the AOD stuff. I think this will be a meta deck. We actually will put it behind the Vegeta here. Another cool thing with the Babidi is that you also can use the Majin cards, meaning you can use the Majin cards from the Majin Buu deck in this leader, which actually makes this deck a little bit better, because this deck also has Overlord, which then you can give your Majin or your AOD card Servant, meaning you can bottom deck them. First you give them 10k, you can bottom deck them, and then draw a card off them. So better draw engine. We're going to give it to Babidi. Which brings us to the last yellow deck, which is going to be Spirit Bomb Goku Vegito deck. Very cool gimmick. Has a field spell that gives the leader a crazy amount of combo power. Has a very powerful Z leader that essentially replaces the need for a Champa Mira combo, which you can still run, but now your leader is able to combo up to almost 80-90k sometimes by itself, and that's not even including a Gohan Piccolo Secret Rare and a Champa, right? So actually, I think the higher Z leader actually gives itself double strike, so you don't even actually need Champa anymore. That's been Yellow's problem for the longest, is it doesn't have any good ways of ending games without using Mira Champa, and now you have a leader that can do it, as well as being able to run Mira Champa. I think this deck is also going to be kind of in the meta category. Now, after we're done, we'll go through and make sure we might change some of the spots, but I definitely can see these decks all being meta for Yellow. I mean, really, all of these decks have the ability of doing it. We're just gonna need to see. Actually, I'm actually gonna put Goku. We're gonna put Goku down 1, actually. I think Majin Vegeta kind of throws this deck down. Again, I don't think people are gonna. I think it comes with the Trunks Vegeta thing, right? The Majin Vegeta deck is so interesting, and does some things much better than this Goku Vegeta deck. I think that's why it's gonna be meta. I think the Goku and Vegeta leader could potentially be meta. It didn't get any good promos. I think it's right on the cusp. Yeah, I think it's where I think I'm more comfortable putting it C tier. I think. I might change my mind. We'll find out. We'll find out later. And then we're gonna move on to red. So we have the Warriors of Universe 7, aka the Android 17. This is the new Invoker deck that is coming out. So I'm actually gonna put this in A tier. I think Warriors of Universe 7 has a very, very high ceiling because it is Invoker. Invoker is one of the best type of control decks in the game, but it was only piloted by a few people because the ceiling was so high with this deck. It's very difficult to pilot at some points, right? That's why we didn't see a lot of people using it, or people using it and winning consistently with it, right? With this Android 17 deck is a completely different style of Invoker. You have a lot more battle card tricks. You're playing a lot more stuff on your opponent's turn, and then activating Invoker effects. rather than just negating everything. You're also not a blue leader at all, which does stop you from using Zeno, stops you from using Bean, not Bean, but D-Magic. Two very important cards for the Invoker deck to thrive, because they were able to use Zeno to grab stuff back, or they were able to use D-Magic to just negate some more. So without that, it makes it a little more difficult. I think this deck goes to an A tier for sure. I think this deck is going to be very good. And I wouldn't want to play against an Invoker list. So people who haven't played against Invoker, be prepared. It's quite a fun time dealing with Invoker and the Sleepy Boys and all that other kind of stuff. And then we have the Warriors of Universe 3, which I'm going to put just directly in D tier. This archetype, the style of this archetype has been recycled like 3 or 4 times. Essentially, you're spamming out a bunch of little guys that absorb into bigger guys. And the payoff really isn't that, rewarding. Both Anilaza boss monsters are very good. The one burns your opponent alive, can attack cards in active mode. Like, there's some very cool things that it can do. And you might catch some decks off guard, but going to a tournament right now and playing at least from, just on paper, Universe 3, it seems like a very awful deck. I think it's right now, with red in the position that it's in, red struggles right now against blue very heavily. And if Sin and Gogeta, which are both better decks than the Universe 3 deck, just on paper, what they actually do, like Gogeta has better endgame, Sin even has better endgame, but Sin also has more aggression early and has 20k double strikes, you have 15k crits, you have multiple swings of those cards, you can neg your opponent's battle cards, and your unisons, and then you have a triple striker and you can play 2 of them on the same turn, and there's a lot of different things you can do. Gogeta also can be kind of aggressive too. You have a double striker and a crit you can play out for 1. You have your unison, which can get double strike, then you turn, you play out your secret rare plus your 4-drop Gogeta, swing triple strike. Like, there's a lot of things you can do, and all of those cards just value up to more than what the Universe 3 deck can actually put out. Alright, now we're going to get into blue, which we're going to start with Android 18. So Android 18, I think, is the best deck in this entire set. I'm going to put it at S tier for the set. This deck has a very high ceiling, but also has probably the lowest floor entry out of any of these decks when it comes to being competitive. Being a blue deck also helps, right? Blue is a very easy color to play. It's a very easy color, I would say, to get into. To master blue, it's very difficult, but I would say over some other colors. But getting into blue is very easy. You have D-Magic, you have Senzu Bean, you have Baby Hatch, you have so many defensive tools and energy manipulation. It's very difficult to deal with unless you're dealing with someone who knows how to play against blue, right? But that's what I'm saying. The entry level is so low, and this deck is a very low to the ground, middle tempo blue deck that's able to swing a bunch, able to restand their leader, and then you can just tech in other cards that kind of just finish your archetype out. I think the Android 18 deck, if Crimson gets hit, which I think Crimson will get hit, I think Android 18 will probably be one of the best blue decks going into next format for a deck that's not being played as a control deck. Which then brings us to the control deck of the blue side, which is going to be Android 21. I'm going to put Android 21 in A tier. And I think it's going to be behind the Universe 7 deck. Android 21 has a very high ceiling, I feel like. It's a very interesting deck, right? Being able to use your opponent's cards, their battle cards and unisons for energy, meaning you get to basically utilize their resources as your resources. The deck has a very powerful floodgate, and a boss monster, and a secret rare now, as well as having just good Android cards in general. A lot of barrier removal. That's a very important thing to have too. I think this is going to be kind of the Universe 7 theory that happened when Realm of the Gods came out. Everyone feared U7. U7 was this incredibly powerful deck. Everyone was scared of it. It topped a ton of events, won very few, and then people learned how to play against it, and then the deck vanished. And I think that's what's going to end up happening with Android 21. Maybe not to that extent because waifu tax, people are going to really want to play Android 21, but I think once people learn how to play against Android 21, it's not going to be very good. Although right now it's on this list as being a high tier deck, I think once the meta actually sets, I think this deck will probably be probably the worst blue deck out of the decks that end up topping right now. So if Crimson is still in the meta, we have Crimson, Gamma, Beerus, Android 18, and then Android 21 would probably be behind them. Now we go into Cumber, which is the only black deck that was released for this set, which is very annoying, being a black player myself. But Cumber is a very good deck. So good, I would actually put this deck in B tier. So I think it is on the cusp of being an A tier deck. Unfortunately, it's really hard to put any black decks that are not Supreme Kai right now, or even SS4 Goku Xeno as an A tier deck. It's not an incredibly aggro deck. It's a very mid-range control deck. It plays a lot of good cards and a lot of cheap cards, honestly. This deck revolves around 1 and 2 drop cards. Even your Secret Rare only costs 2. I think it kind of falls in line, like I said, it falls between the A and the B tier. You know what, I would probably actually feel comfortable with putting it at A. We'll put it at A. I think, so, not really a hot take, I think Cumber has a better matchup against Android 21 than a lot of other decks in this set, excluding like U7, because I think U7 has a pretty good matchup against this too. But Cumber has a very good matchup against 21. It's not, I think 21, again, the thing with 21, it's going to struggle against decks that are not blue and green, and black obviously is not blue or green. So, but Cumber has almost like a pseudo yellow effect, right? You can keep stuff in rest mode. You play really powerful boss monsters. You probably play one of the best Secret Rares in the game. I would put next to Beast Gohan, which is Cumber or Evil Saiyan. The card is completely snapped. It's one of the best Secret Rares they've ever printed, by far the best Secret Rare they've ever printed for black. And it's very exciting that we get to actually get now a leader to kind of base this off of too. So I'm going to put it in an A tier. And now what I say is the high floor is because any deck that is not an incredibly aggro black deck, people tend to flock away from. People don't want to play it. It's too difficult. They want to just play other stuff because it's easier, which is fine. But Cumber kind of goes in that Xeno Sin category for me, right? If you guys know, I'm a very big fan of the Xeno Sin leader. I think that deck is incredibly high floored, but with a very high payoff. But no one's going to really want to play that deck or learn how to play it because it's not the fun black deck to play like something like Gogeta Xeno was at the time, right? I think Cumber's going to kind of fall in that category now. People are excited to play it because people really like the character. He's very popular. He has a ton of support in this set and a promo, so I think people will play him a lot. I don't think he's going to top a ton. But I think there are going to be people who are going to be able to top with Cumber. I'm hoping to be one of them. That is the goal. So then we get to the last color, which is going to be green. We're going to go to Hellfighter 17. We're going to put Hellfighter in C tier. So this is a green deck that does not do a lot of hand destruction. This deck does not do... It has like a little bit of board control. A lot of the spot removal in this deck comes from the Z leader. Which is when your opponent taps a card, you can KO something 4 or less. There's some pretty cool abilities in there. The deck doesn't draw a ton, and like I said, it doesn't have a lot of hand destruction. So you would think that the big payoff would be able to kill stuff, and I don't think any of the cards actually kill ignoring barrier either. So you can't even snipe, barrier cards. I think the other problem with the deck is that a lot of the cards cannot function unless your leader is a Hellfighter 17. Or an Android 17, meaning you can't actually use a lot of the effects until you actually awaken, which slows the deck down by a whole turn, which in green decks need as much advantage as possible. The other problem is trying to find a unison to fit into this deck. Green feels really bad without Dormant, and even doesn't feel great with Dormant. But if you're taking away one of the green's most powerful cards and not running a unison, it's really hard for a deck to function very well, especially in a high competitive scene. It's just gonna seem to kind of fall to the wayside. Sure, people will figure out how to make it at least decent, but it's a C tier deck until we get some better support. Then we have SS4 Goku. This deck I'm gonna put it in B tier. It's gonna be behind these two decks because green just is an inferior color to yellow right now still. Even with both of them not being played a ton, it's still gonna fall underneath those two yellow decks. So the big thing with this Goku deck is it has the best cycling probably from any green deck we've ever seen. This deck is going to draw a ton of cards. They might have a gigantic hand size. I think from using Untap, finding a lot of my hand sizes were between like on turn 3, like 9 to 12, depending on how you draw, and what you're able to play and, you know, use your energy wise. But the deck can be pretty good. It's got a pretty decent Z battle card. It's a very cool mechanic where you can play these guys from the warp, which I believe none of them get when they get removed from battle. They get removed from the game. So if you're playing against the black deck and they warp those cards, I believe you can just play them back out. Like, there's a lot of really interesting effects you can have from these cards. So it's a good deck. It got a promo which didn't really do too much for the deck, but it is a green generic leader. Probably the most generic green leader we've had, next to Cell, which Cell is, I know it's not really generic, but you have your archetype cards and you just play a bunch of other tech stuff. I think this is going to be a better deck because they can search out green Saiyans on the front side, which is nuts because you can search out almost everything you possibly want, no energy cost, you know, no energy requirement on it. So we'll put it in B tier. Which then brings us to the last deck, which is going to be the Son Gohan deck. This is a Warriors of Universe 7 deck that essentially you can just play a rainbow deck. I think this is going to be a fun deck. We'll actually put it below. We'll put it below this. Yeah, we'll put it below whatever this is, the U3 deck. It's a cool deck. It can play out some really powerful boss monsters or really powerful cards with its first effect, which it plays out a 3-drop Universe 7 card for 1 yellow or 1 black. It's a very interesting thing. The fact that this deck is locked to playing only Universe 7 cards, meaning it cannot be competitively viable. You're limiting too much of your tech options. There's not much to really talk about there. It's a cool deck, fun deck. People are gonna play it, but it's definitely not the better out of the two when it comes to the starter deck. So that is my tier list, guys. If you guys agree with it, if you guys don't agree with it, let me know down below in the comments. Love to hear what you guys have to say. As always, thank you guys for the support, and I will see you guys in the next video.